You're listening to the Hello World Podcast, number 10. My name is Sean Wildermuth, and I'm your host. The Hello World Podcast is where you can hear from some of your favorite developers, authors, and speakers about how they got started in this business. We go way back to their first computer, their first code experience, and their first job. Today's episode was with the delightful Michele Larue Bustamante. She's a managing partner at Soliance, a Microsoft Regional Director and a Microsoft MVP. She's been designing and implementing enterprise systems for over 20 years and has held senior executive positions at several corporations, has assembled software development teams, and implemented process for all aspects of the software development lifecycle. Michele is a frequent conference presenter and keynote speaker, has chaired many conferences and events, and has been published regularly in several technology journals. Michele's books include her best-selling book, Learning WCF from O'Reilly. Today's conversation with Michele was just great. We got to talk about what it's like to have a career in software, not just a job in software, what passion looks and feels like, and how warm it is in San Diego. I think you'll enjoy it. So I'd like to welcome Michele Larue Bustamante to the show. Most of you know her from everything on the internet and, of course, WCF galore. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
How's the weather where you're at?
It's very warm, I'm happy to say, except that I'm inside working instead of enjoying it too much right now. It was 86 degrees yesterday and today in San Diego. Awesome sauce.
Isn't it 86 every day in San Diego?
No, you know what? It usually isn't. It's usually a temperate 70 on average all year.
You poor thing.
I don't know if that sounds good or bad, but gosh, it just gets so cold at night. I kind of have to wear a sweater every once in a while. So
You poor thing.
Yeah.
With all our listeners probably digging out snow, I'm not sure we should be complaining.
But see, I'm from Toronto, so I'm allowed to say those things because I escaped that other world. So it's not like I've always lived this, life of warmth.
There's that old joke that the easiest job in the world is the weatherman in San Diego.
Yeah, probably, right? It's going to be the same.
Yes.
But, I'll tell you a funny story, sort of, is that when I moved here, I came with the intention that I was going to enjoy the sun and sand, and my goodness, look how beautiful it is. I can't wait to live there and get away from Toronto. This is awesome. And then I became a workaholic.
Isn't that the way it works?
I kind of defeated the purpose. People come visit me and they say, "Where's your tan, dude? Like, what's going on?" And I don't have an answer, really. It's I don't want to say it's a bad thing because obviously I love what I do, but it's an interesting twist to the original plan.
Of course, but best laid plans and all that. I'm not immune to that. People.
Where are you living?
I live in Atlanta.
Ah, okay. So it's you don't get a lot of snow there.
We do not. We get a little ice every once in a while, but we do have to have coats, unlike in San Diego. Right.
I actually relish the days where it's cold enough I can wear a coat because, there's this thing called fashion that, would sort of compel me to want to change, kind of the way I dress from time to time. And I don't get quite the diversity I used to.
Well, if anyone who's seen me at conferences knows, I have no idea what fashion is. Yeah, that's very
I think
clear.
it's a chick thing sometimes too. Unless you're a metrosexual kind of guy, like Magnus. Magnus is one of those.
Yes.
We're friends. I'm allowed to say that. And he would probably proudly say, "Of course I am."
Of course.
He wears cool scarves and things.
That's it. So I need to get a scarf. That's
that's all you need, really.
Conversation.
All a guy needs really is a scarf and a nice watch. Like you're good.
Well, 1 out of 2 ain't bad.
Mm-hmm. The problem with watches is they're so expensive. You see, I can buy cheap earrings.
That's true.
My husband can't buy a cheap watch.
You can, but it's obvious.
Right. Exactly. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When it makes your arm green, it's a bad sign.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So where So you grew up in Toronto. Is that where you went to school as well, or?
Yep, actually it is.
And did you start playing with these odd little computing devices before you went to college, or?
Barely, because I'm a little older. So I would say when I was in high school, we did not do anything with computers, believe it or not. Very little, very little. Just, the simplest things like some sort of basic program, printing out a list, iterating numbers, something like that. But not enough to where you had a computer at home and actually did things. In fact, I think the first computer we had at home was a 286 or a 186. And it was when I was in college. And I remember being really, really proud because the first class I took in university, the first year was sort of a general year where you did a little bit of everything.
Right.
And I was going to specialize in accounting finance. And one of the classes was sort of computer related in the sense that, we were supposed to do these things with an expert system program where you had to ask questions and present answers and have it go through the process page after page. And because I was also taking a computing class, I learned how to do a DOS program. So I thought we were just super bright by getting a floppy disk, 5.5. 5.25, sorry.
Yep.
And creating this this little DOS program that the teacher could take our, homework, put it in his computer, and it would literally run, install the expert system, and immediately launch it. Like that was like a big deal. It took me like weeks to get that working because I had no idea really what I was doing yet. But we just thought we were the cat's meow because we got that working. And I think that's when I got hooked, just, wow, that was really super cool. And it was hard to do, but we did it,
And worth it.
Yeah, but that was college for me. So I don't know if maybe where I grew up it was different, but Toronto isn't really too far behind the scenes. So I just think we didn't really have a lot of computers around at the time.
Sure, it's a lot of different people we've talked to. Some people were like me where they got started really young, and others were like I didn't when I talked to Brian, he really didn't get involved until he was way deep in. He was already a pilot when he got involved. So
Brian Noyes.
Yeah, Brian Noyes.
Yep. Yeah, that's right. Well, of course, he was doing other things and he could have gotten into software, but I think we're of similar age range. So sorry for calling you out, Brian, but I guess, I don't think he would have had access to computers any much earlier than I.
Sure.
Because I got my first real job in computers when I was... Well, it would have been 1992-ish here in San Diego. And before that, I was doing tech support. So I think I graduated in 89 from university. So
we're about the same age then.
Yeah. If that gives you any idea, we just simply, there was no internet yet. There was just barely computers.
Absolutely.
So. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And when you got that first job, what were you writing software in?
So it was actually kind of interesting. I got the job after coming on a vacation here. So that's a whole nother story, how I got the job, but we can always go back to that. And I didn't really know what I was doing. I got the job over the phone and I somehow sold myself and they said, okay, come on down and I need you in 3 weeks. So I quit my job, packed up all my stuff and drove across the country and took this job. And my first job was working with a scripting language that was written by the people in the company based on C++.
Interesting.
And the scripting language job was, wait for it, to program these booths that took your picture on a chroma key background and allowed you to pluck out your headshot, if you will.
Right.
And you would point out where with an algorithm they had built, the program would let you choose your eyes and nose and chin. And then it would resize your face and put it in a picture that was pre-created with a hole in the face for like Marilyn Monroe or whatever, Star Trek, like a group shot with one face empty. And it would automatically put you in that and print it as a postcard. So it was a booth and it was called Postcards RS or something in the beginning. The company later renamed to something else called Imageware Systems. But that was what I started doing because they had this whole foundation based on layering, alpha channel layering, stuff that Photoshop uses, for example. Yep. They had patented and I think got some money from those patents back in the day. But it started out as an imaging and layering company that did these booths, and they would sell these booths to, places all over the world.
So like a tourist little thing people would go do. And
yeah. So my job was to sit in the room, take photos, use the imaging program and, blank out the faces using the tool they had written called Image Wizard. And it was like a Photoshop where you could, rub out a piece of the layer, right? And, create it so that it would be the correct position and algorithm using the script so that when you plugged it into the postcard, engine, it would just work. And so I got to play with that all day and take tons and tons of pictures of myself just for fun. And it was hilarious because I was sending postcards home left and right of me and all these scenes like in front of a beach and this and that. And it would be completely not real. I was not actually at the beach because I was working all the time. But, we had a really good time with it and I loved it. But I was programming another language that was written by the company at first. And I remember my first day, this guy put me in a room to test me out. And he said, okay, just make this little image animate. And I had never done C++ before, let alone knew how to set up an environment. I mean, I was doing DBase 3+ or something before I got to California and playing with that on my own. So it was very terse, and so I didn't really know yet. I hadn't learned how to learn. I hadn't learned how to research. We didn't have the internet. I didn't even know where to start. I just remember looking at the screen going, I have no freaking idea where to start. Like, what am I supposed to do? And I remember the guy, was such a nice person. He would come in and say, okay, let me walk you through it. And he would walk me through like every step. And I felt like such a loser, but I really just needed to start from the beginning, even though I had been coding in another language. It was too advanced for me at first, I think. So it was good that I had that first job because I got to do lots and lots of different things that forced me to learn and like push myself. And therefore, of course, the extra hours and all of that, because I realized if I don't, I'm not going to get anywhere. Right.
Right. And so did you transition to C++ after that?
I did not. Because what ended up happening is first, I did a lot of time with this scripting language and that was it. And then I guess we decided that we were going to launch this product called Image Wizard, which I still have a box for here somewhere. And, we did the whole shrink wrapping with the assembly line, all that kind of stuff. So it was fun. Anyway, that product was launching and I wasn't really part of building the product at the time. But what they wanted is documentation. But our CTO didn't want just any documentation. It had to be as animated and interesting as the product. So he was a little crazy in terms of like where we spent resources. But the benefit of that was, of course, he had me doing these like tasks that really didn't add value, probably long term for the company making money. But I sure as heck had fun. So I had to make this animated documentation and I was using, wait for it, Toolbook. Toolbook was like pre-VB potentially going to have some capability like that, but it especially was used well for documentation. Like you could create these pages of content with graphics around it and animate things on the page. And, so it was all about animation and graphics pretty much. So I had to coordinate all of that and write the code. And then somewhere along the line, somebody I knew, Karen Watterson, who was the editor of Pinnacle Publishing back in the day. Yeah. She was friends with one of the people I worked with, or neighbors, and she needed someone to do an article with her comparing Toolbook with VB. And I hadn't played with VB yet, so I agreed to help her with the article. And that's how I got into writing, because that accidental opportunity, I co-wrote this article with her, and she said, why don't you write some more? And I said, okay. So basically I moved into VB shortly after that because we started using VB for some other applications in our company. So I went from Toolbook to VB, and then I went from VB to C++ and all the Ole automation days and, OpenGL and a lot of those fun things. Wind tune, thunking, the whole 16 to 32-bit transition, if you remember that.
I do. I remember the pain.
It was very painful. And of course, back then we were distributing products, trying to get them to install on people's machines, which was not always easy. To do remotely. And then it wasn't until years of that, C++, I did pretty much C++ for a good number of years. And then I went into Java at around 99 or something like that. And back to .NET after that.
So at any point in this, did you have mentors that sort of led you the way? I mean, because it seems like you were doing these languages and you started writing and, did you have sort of people, it sounded like the woman you worked with the writing was sort of pushing you in that direction. And then you have these people you worked with.
Yeah. It's almost like, I think a lot of people can be mentors in different ways.
Sure.
I would say, I had to fight my way through learning how to be a programmer in the early days of that job. And that really I did by just not wanting to fail, right? Because I took a while to learn how to research. I don't think that came naturally, and maybe it doesn't for everybody, but I had to build some confidence, basically, right?
Yeah, of course.
But once I had some momentum, I think what really pushed me back then was more just that things had to get done. And I worked really like 7 days a week, like a lot. Because there was always a pressing deadline at that company, constant. And that was probably good and bad, right? It was kind of sweatshop era. But because even New Year's Eve once I worked, like what really has to get done New Year's Eve, right? Looking back, I'm like, God, that was dumb. Like I could have enjoyed that vacation. My boss really didn't need that thing, the first week of the year. But, these artificial deadlines get put in place sometimes, right? When people are feeling like it has to be now and you just do it, right? Especially when you need a visa to get back to, San Diego.
Yeah. And when when you're young and you feel like you're trying to prove something, Right.
So I think that I kind of taught a lot of the coding aspects to myself back then, but I did have the mentoring on the writing side, and I had some, Karen Watterson was awesome. I mean, she just really encouraged me. And I would say probably the CTO that hired me at Imageware was a mentor of sorts, because he knew how to kind of push you, right?
Sure.
To challenge yourself, and maybe a little too good, but at the end of the day, I benefited from that. So I have no complaints. And then I think as my career evolved, I had mentors for things like management, like my first time being a manager of a team. Obviously, it's good to have people to guide you. And sometimes those mentors guide you to do things that you realize maybe I won't do it that way. There's that too.
Right.
I've had a few of those. And so, probably for coding, it's not so much that kind of mentor, because that I just did out of fight or flight. But I would definitely say for other things, writing and management and moving into executive positions and even going into consulting, right? I mean, for a long time, I worked with iDesign, and I would say Yuval and I, we were friends because we spoke together, and he was a great mentor for moving out of my CIO position into an independent consulting experience, because he already had that going, right?
Sure.
And he kind of pushed me to get back into writing and things that I had given up a little bit while I was doing Java. Because I felt like when I moved to the company to be an executive, I had to focus on being good at that.
Right.
So I didn't have time to be like writing speeches and, having those kind of deadlines, writing article deadlines, all that kind of stuff. That was too much. So I took a break. And then I just kind of got back into it, so he was a great mentor for that. Did
you have a passion for writing that sort of got sparked when you worked with Karen, or was that something that was sort of newfound for you?
That's a really good question. So I didn't think so. And then many years later, one of my good girlfriends from university said, "You always liked writing." And I remember thinking, how do you remember that? I don't remember that. But maybe she's right. I don't know. I suppose I did a little bit, and I still like to write, but of course, it's very time consuming. So, you like, I'd love to write fiction, but it's very time consuming. Maybe I'll do that when I retire one day. Right.
That's the plan, is for so many of us that I've talked to. Mm-hmm. That's interesting. And so when you transitioned from this job that it sounded like you kept for quite a long time, did you transition into an executive role and the manager role, or did you have to leave your job to?
Oh God, that's a really good one, because, I could not really get recognized in my first job, even after having, written articles and written a book and taught classes at the university. I kind of fell into a lot of those things in the early part of my career, first 5 years, and I couldn't get a raise to save my life. Yeah. So I left that job and doubled my salary. Thank you very much. Which back then wasn't a lot to double, but anyway.
Sure, but
but the point is, it really did take leaving the job to get, kind of lifted up a level, because I think it's hard sometimes for companies to see this like junior person that came in and you knew them when, and recognize that they've got a lot more to offer, right?
Yeah, and I think that's such a common story.
Right. Sure.
And I think there's a lot of us out there who don't know what we're worth either. So I remember when, I guess this was 93, and I was changing jobs, and I went, this time I'm not going to lowball. I'm going to pick a number they can't possibly say yes to, because, I don't know how much I am worth. And they said yes. And I immediately knew, oh no, I didn't ask for enough.
Yeah.
And then, of course I had to take it.
Sometimes you are what you ask for.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
But I have heard that story before many a time, and it all depends who you work for too.
Of course.
But it's much easier to move up if you're looking for that by leaving. And I'd say I probably made a few moves like that before I moved into consulting. So becoming an executive was definitely a change of job, right? I moved from another company where I was a manager, and I moved into an executive position. So, that was a great experience too. I mean, I loved every minute of it, right? So all of those things were just kind of happy circumstances that I decided to accept, right?
Sure.
You're hearing my cat, by the way, who has decided to sneak into this room. So let me know if that's a challenge for us.
It's not. I think it's fine.
I can fix it.
Yeah, no,
I'm not going to kill the cat. I will just, move her away and silence her.
Well, if you haven't fixed the cat yet, I would suggest doing that as well.
Right. We have fixed her.
Oh, yes. That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. So let me ask you about managing, because this is something that I'm sort of passionate about in the years when, I spent some time leading groups, and then I managed a couple groups and realized I hated kind of being a manager, but liked being a leader. When you did management, were you getting the coding bug fixed at the same time? Was it the ability to be able to be a contributor, or was it really full-time management?
I think that's always a challenge. Mm-hmm. I have always, my first management position, I really was still coding and managing, but finding it hard to do both.
Sure.
And I really didn't want to give up the coding part, but it's amazing even today, sometimes very, very large projects, I feel like that's what I'm doing. I'm managing projects and using my technical brain to coordinate the success of it. And yet not always putting, as much code into it as I'd like to, Sure. It comes and goes depending. So management just plain takes time, right? And it does diminish your ability to write code. And when I was CIO, that was a very different circumstance, because what I did is I did find it was hard to manage a team and also be focused on the business side.
Yeah.
So I got a VP engineering in place as I was doing the business side. And that worked out really, really well because it turns out, actually, he was a much better manager. I think, people who like to work for me have a certain style about them. Like, I think that there are certain types of people that work better for someone who is, let's say, inspirational and a little bit more laid back. People that like to work with me are the kind that are already type A, like, because they just like to do stuff and get it done, right? But when you need to motivate people, I don't know that I'm really good at that, to be honest with you. But this guy that came and worked with me, I still to this day will say I have never seen a better manager of people.
Wow.
His name was Jose, and just, I mean, he just knew how to make people want to do stuff, give them ownership, get them to be inspired to do it, because he would get them to commit to the dates themselves. And he would let them, goof off and play Counter-Strike and whatever here and there in the day. But when, the proverbial shit hit the fan, like, he was like, guys, what did you do? You messed up,
Right.
And we were a 24/7 op. So that could happen from time to time. And everybody was right there by his side because they knew, oh, crap, you know what? If we made Jose mad, we got a problem.
Right.
And it's a gift.
I agree. So
I think, we should do the things that we do best and try our best at the things we don't do best, I guess, But managing is not my favorite thing. I like leading too. I like how you put that. Like, what do you mean when you say managing versus leading, for example?
Well, for me, leading was, there is, certainly some project management in there, but it's not people management as such. It's we're all on the same team in some sense, and I'm an individual contributor when I was leading. When I was really doing managing, and I was, handling the code and the not code, right? Vacations and evaluating people and all the other stuff that goes with managing as well. It separated me from the team because suddenly I was this authority that, for good or bad, I had to make decisions that were going to impact them, whether it was getting rid of the guy who didn't really belong on the team anymore, or giving, the raises to the A+ guys and giving the smaller raises to the A- guys. All that seemed to impact my ability to lead the team because I was no longer, to me, it felt like the difference between a quarterback and a coach. They both have a leading.
I totally agree with you. Yeah. And firing people, letting go of people, disciplining people, totally not my favorite thing to do.
It's interesting. It's mostly not my favorite thing to do, but I didn't mind it when it was about lack of performance. When it was about head count and budget and all that, it's just horrible. Yeah. But if there are people that, I have this sort of idea about what we do for a living, and that is, in some sense, I think we're mostly overpaid for what we do. And so if you're lazy and overpaid, I have very little patience.
Yeah. No, it's not about not agreeing with it or not, doing what you got to do. I've always done what I have to do too, but it's just not the favorite thing. And I would say on that topic, though, I learned one probably very valuable lesson in my management experiences through the years. I worked for people who, at times tried to push me to use their management style. When I was first learning how to be a manager, and that didn't work for me because it wasn't my style. And then I worked for other people who were manipulative. And then, I would go through these periods where I'm like, okay, how do I encourage these people to do something a different way? How do I, difficult people, right? I'm not talking about regular people that just know how to come in and do their job. I'm talking about really challenging personalities, people getting upset, not getting along, like just stupid shit. There's no other way to put it. Stuff that should not even be in the workplace, right?
Yeah.
And so I've had some pretty interesting inheritances of teams that just were hard to manage. And I think the one lesson that I learned is, I think I tried at first to show, like, say, a position of strength to people that were trying to give me, you know, like the stare, the cold stare, or whatever, like just bad attitudes, right? And I think what I realized after all that was said and done, that, you know what, the best thing anybody could ever do is be yourself. You know, and that might sound obvious, but it's not obvious when you're first young and trying to learn how to be a manager, trying to learn how to show a position of strength and exercise that if you haven't figured it out. And I think if anybody could get anything from that experience, it would be that, like, just if you are a nice person and you don't like telling someone that they're making you uncomfortable, then tell them, I really don't like that I have to tell you, you're making me uncomfortable. Like,
Absolutely.
This is not acceptable. And I think, you know, that ends up actually taking a huge load off of the pressure of, how do I get through this person? It's called just honesty, right? Just say it as it is. And don't worry if they think you're weak because you didn't come at them with a hammer. Like, it doesn't matter. If it's not your style, it's not your style, you know?
Yeah, I tend to agree with that, because there is that, you know, there have been those points in my career, early and in some cases late, where I felt like the 12-year-old with a tie on, right? I'm in the suit of what I think I'm supposed to do, but I don't feel it. I'm the manager now. What does that mean? And do I really have the skill to pull it off? And now I'm going to have to act like I am. And you know, and people read through that pretty easily, usually, you know,
I think,
and take advantage of it. So,
do you do much management now?
Not really. Most of the my business these days is coaching and training, and I'm much more happy there. Yeah, and I don't get to code as much as I used to, as I'd like to, but it also means that I don't get called in when everyone else's beeper goes off, right? I'm there to help them plan, and then I can go, you know, do my Pluralsight courses or write my articles or my little Kindle books when I want to, and you know, it's been about quality of life versus, you know, trying to get every project out there. It's not as interesting to me. But
you started out working in companies where you were more or less, you know, working for somebody else, and then eventually went out on your own. You didn't start out, you know, on your own. No,
not at all. No, I worked in companies for, I guess, 18 years before I really took it seriously to work my own. I had, you know, we would do little side projects here and there, but it wasn't until maybe 10 years ago that I went, you know, working for someone else. You know, I can't even imagine getting a job now.
I think I could do it, but it would be very strange to have to go somewhere every day, unless it was my own business.
Right.
And you had the flexibility. Even getting a startup off the ground, you know, sometimes the idea of getting funded and having VCs require you to have, you know, an office, and everybody's got to be there. And now you can't do anything else because it's a distraction away from the startup, is a pretty, you know, quick decision maker for, hey, why don't I bootstrap this thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, instead of going that route, because I think after a certain age, the level of control you want over your day-to-day existence increases quite immensely.
Exponentially. I mean, because that's really what it comes down to. I've built a couple of, you know, little startup ideas that, you know, I had tried to build into something larger. And then it got to sort of a point where I was like, I could devote all my time to this. But I've lost, you know, I don't.
Like the TV, like the TV one?
Yeah.
The one where you look for TV shows? That's pretty cool.
It is, but Apple killed the app in the App Store because I can't charge money for movies. So Apple, you know, pretty much just killed the business. So without being able to get on iPhones, it's a hard business model.
Sure. Yeah. Sure. But it's fun. Like, I'm sure it was a lot of fun to put it together. Enormously. And
it's still, you know, doesn't cost any, you know, much money to keep it out there, and it still lives, and the people that are using it use it. And it's not like I have to think about it every day. I'm not going to pull it down for spite, but it's one of those, you know, but that to me, that's sort of the serial entrepreneur thing. You know, you try, you fail, and you're fine, and you learn from that, and you go try again, and you know,
But the failure is tapered quite a bit if you're cautious. That can also sometimes mean that the growth is tapered, but not necessarily. I remember meeting with a VC for Snapboard, our product, and that was something that was sort of an idea in my mind since 97 that I finally did in a new way when things were more visual and interactive with HTML5 and so on, and pulled a team together around that. And, we decided not to go for funding. And part of it was the influence of this one VC that interviewed me. And we talked about he just offered me some time. Great guy, Mark Sister in Los Angeles. And he basically said, normally we don't put people like you at the head of a startup because, you can do too well outside of the startup. So you're not going to go, come in and take funding and make 60 grand a year for 3 years, not knowing what you're going to get back.
Right.
And when he said that, I went, you're right. And I think I kind of already knew that. And I think actually most of the team already knew that. But it was kind of interesting to have that kind of put in your face. And I realized, I'm going to bootstrap this thing because then I don't have to worry about that. And then lo and behold, we get corporate customers and we start to grow, and it's slow growth, but it's still growth and it's great. And we get to do that while I still get to start Alliance and build a really flourishing consulting business,
Absolutely.
Which is, that was my bird in the hand, right? It's it's the thing that I already knew could be very successful. So it's like, the wild success, that promise of the $40 million company or more is, it's a great pie in the sky dream, but it's easier to do when you're 20 and you can eat ramen noodles, because then you can take those risks
and you don't
not
have a 5-year-old.
Yeah, you don't have a 5-year-old. You don't have like a cushy life that you've built and now say, oh, by the way, we're going to scale back and eat craft dinner,
Yes.
So, yeah.
But there's also this, I do a lot of work. I don't know if it's a lot of work, but I do events here with the startup community in Atlanta. And when I hear the young kids talk about, their goal is to get VC funding, I'm like, really? Because all you're doing is then giving away, VC funding isn't you getting paid. I don't know.
No.
And this whole thing of getting funded being a goal, it never appealed to me because I didn't want to give up power for money that we didn't really need. If it was about getting an office and getting a conference room table, I've been through that with some startups in Boston, and it's not interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think at that point you have to know that this thing could be something.
Yeah.
So I would say this in a different way. If I took, Snapboard and I said to myself, what if you were 25 and you could live on less? What would you have done? And the answer is I would have got funding, because if I put 150% of my time just into that, I'm sure I could make it something, but it might take me, 5 years to get it there.
Yeah.
I'm not going to take those 5 years at, my age with all the other things that, I could be doing with my time that earn money and give me, a peaceful existence. So instead, you make a decision. I'm passionate enough about it to keep it there and build it. And I do, and it's growing and it's doing well. And I actually have other people that can manage it. Hey, that's even better, right?
Even better.
So I don't have to be like the person on the hook, if you will. I'm still there, of course, but bottom line is, if it were to grow immensely, there are people that can be 100% dedicated to that are very near and dear to me. So it's good. So it's an interesting problem. It's an interesting process that happens. If I could roll back time, I would say I was not very strategic about my career at all. I mean, I thought I was just going to be a programmer. Okay. And then suddenly I was writing, and then I was teaching classes, and then I was speaking at conferences, and then I was doing all these management and executive positions, and then I was consulting and doing even more of the visibility stuff. And who knew, right? And then I was an entrepreneur very late, right? I got involved in a business that was acquired by Quest, and that was, years ago. And I was fortunate enough to bring my security experience to a great company called BitCoo that a friend of mine runs, and it did well. But I came in late on that, right? Like I could have been, I don't know, probably 10 years ago thinking about these things, but I just really didn't have the experience. And that's where a mentor would have been great. I didn't have that kind of mentor, because I think the problem is you have to find a mentor that is like ahead of you,
right?
Not at your equal. And I think a lot of times I've had mentors that are sort of just very little step ahead of me as opposed to way far beyond, right. And that's where strategy comes in. If you can look at your career and say, where do I want to be in 5 years, which I think they try to teach you in high school, but I never got the memo.
No.
Then you would say to yourself, I need a mentor that's at that place, and maybe they can help me, get there. And then you have to find a little bit of luck, because you got to find the right mentor, hopefully a good one, right?
Not necessarily one who's trying to, use you to get what they need, but, also, their self-interest, but also, global interest.
So I'm looking for someone who owns an island and a jet plane that could be my mentor.
But even if you lived on an island, you'd be inside the whole time coding.
Right. Well, maybe by then I wouldn't need to. I would do it for fun, but not, for have to.
Yeah.
Eventually one has to make a decision to relax. I don't know when that will be.
Yeah, I haven't figured that out either.
It's kind of funny because I really do like what I do so much, and I'm sure you feel the same, that I think some of my friends think I'm just freaking nuts, because they don't work like that. And I'm not saying, they have a great life, some of them 9 to 5 off on the weekend. And they just must think I'm insane, but I really do like what I do.
Passions, I feel very lucky because I'm able to be passionate about what I do. Mm-hmm. I know there are a lot of people out there who have 9 to 5s, and some of them are developers, some, lots of them aren't. Mm-hmm. And they don't care for their job. It's just what they do to allow themselves to have weekends and evenings and raise families and get picket fences. And that's fine. It's just a different experience than I have.
Well, I think it's respectable when a person can say, you know what, I do this job, I do it well. I'm not looking for moving up. I'm not looking for the next step. I'm not looking to be busier. I'm not looking to fight for that level. And if you can say that and go home and say, I make enough money, I'm covering the costs, I have a great life, then I think that's fabulous, because it's really, you know what you need to be happy. And for me, I don't think finances is the drive. It's just, that's a side effect, right? So finances is not it. It's just, I don't know how to stop enjoying challenges, so it doesn't ever end.
Maybe soon. Soon.
Yeah.
Well, it's been a joy having you on the podcast. It's been a great conversation.
Thanks for having me.
I'm more than happy to. One of the goals of the next 10 episodes is I'm trying to get at least 5 women on the show, because I think hearing more of the startup experiences for how women got into this business, I think would be really good. Because I think some people, assume that, or young women sometimes assumes they can't get into it for one reason or another. So I'm hoping to expand that part of our stories.
Well, and if I can plug the podcast that I'm starting with Iris Klassen.
Please.
We're also going to it'll be different from what you're doing. I think it's complementary, but we're trying to sort of learn about different types of careers in tech, not just coding, but really anything, even tech writers, whatever. And so we're collecting people from all over different industries and types of jobs, and we're going to talk about their experiences. So hopefully people can check that out. It's at womentechlove.com.
Great.
And whatever you do, don't go to womenlovetech.com, because that will be a very different experience.
Uh-oh.
Exactly. Just saying.
Now I got to check both of them out.
I know you will. Watch it.
Thanks again, Michele.
Thank you. Take care.